Well, everyone, the iPhone XS by far is probably one of the more interesting phones that Apple has ever made. And, I definitely do think this phone still has a lot of quality and a lot of capability, but is this phone still worth buying in 2024? Well, let's go and take a look and see if that is the case. Now, the first thing I'll tell you is I've had a lot of experience with the iPhone XS. I bought it basically the day it came out, and I've been, basically a fan of this phone, maybe not since the first day, but, maybe like a couple years after. But this phone is at a very interesting spot because so many things about this phone have changed. So we're going to go and take a look at it throughout this video. If you want to, and if you want to buy some phones I would recommend buying this year, links will be down in the description. You can get that from there, and you can help support the channel at the same time. Now, starting off with the outside of the iPhone XS, this is a very interesting phone. So on the outside, it looked basically almost exactly the same thing as the previous iPhone before this, which was the iPhone X, and the XS came out in 2017. Now, personally for me, as I mentioned, before, for a while, the iPhone XS on the front with that 5.8-inch Super Retina OLED display, it looked good. I didn't really have too much to complain about here. And I definitely thought that if you had a phone like the iPhone XS, it really didn't seem like that big of an upgrade coming from the iPhone X. And I still stand by that. I definitely don't think the iPhone XS was like a massive, monumental change, but there were some internal changes that were actually very nice to have. And I still think from that perspective, that was like a kind of good thing going on for this particular phone. Now, the iPhone XS had the notch up top, which was great. You basically have the curved glass, not a curved glass, but the curved sides, which actually gave the impression that this was like a kind of a better, nicer phone than it really was, which was something that's always funny with some of these types of iPhones. And you were getting, the standard 60Hz display. You're getting a lightning port at the bottom, which still looked and still feels very good for the most part. And there's really, like I said, not a lot to complain about here. Getting the glass back, so it's a standard glass back, the Apple logo right up there, in the center of it. You have the dual camera setup on the top left. You have the wireless charging pad in the middle, IP certification. You're still getting a lot of good stuff with this type of phone too, which is still very, very nice. And on the outside, like I said before, even though it wasn't this massive change coming from the iPhone X, I still feel like this phone had a lot of capability, and there's still a lot of stuff that this phone has that some of the newer ones don't have, like Force Touch. Having that Force Touch is actually really nice with that 3D touch on the display, and it's still a really nice thing to have. Unfortunately, the newer phones don't have it, but this one actually did, which was pretty cool. So I will tell you, the iPhone XS on the outside, although it's not like the first phone I'd recommend people to buy anymore, from a hardware perspective on the outside, it definitely doesn't feel like that outdated of a phone, and I definitely do think it's still up there, in terms of, good quality phones that you should probably that I would recommend people to buy. It's still one of those options for sure. So from that perspective, that kind of covers it up there. Now, in terms of the camera setup, this is also another interesting thing going on for this phone. So like I said, that dual camera setup on the backside, 12 megapixel wide and 12 megapixel telephoto lens, as well as that 7 megapixel standard camera on the front. So you're getting things like 4K at 60 on the back, 1080p at 60 on the front, and overall, it's a pretty good camera. I definitely think that out of most cameras that Apple has made, this thing is a pretty solid option at that time. And I would say it was a pretty good upgrade coming from the iPhone X. We were getting finally some, sort of 1080p at 60 on the front, which is super nice. But I will tell you, the iPhone 11 camera was so much better than this thing. So it kind of left this thing in the dust in a way, because it was okay, you're going to buy that newer camera, or you're going to buy that, this phone. Well, the next one after this was so much better that what was even the point? You know what I mean? So that's kind of one thing to kind of keep in mind too. It kind of bums me out that the iPhone 11 camera or the iPhone XS camera wasn't as good as the 11's, but it makes me happy that the 11 camera was a big upgrade. So it's kind of like a yin and yang kind of thing. But I definitely do think with the iPhone XS camera, very solid camera, still very, very good. I like that camera a lot. And, it's good for how old this phone is. It's not an amazing camera, but it's good for how old this phone is. But like I said, definitely with phones like the iPhone 11 and 11 Pro, those were significantly better. So just take that as you will. I don't want to hate on this phone too much, but it was a good camera, and it's still a pretty decent camera for how old it is. But, it's definitely not that great of a camera, and it was a good upgrade coming from the iPhone X. So that's kind of how I'd sum it up there. Now, in terms of the software and longevity of this phone, this is a very interesting aspect, from this device. So here's what I'll basically tell you from this particular phone's perspective. With the iPhone XS, this is a phone that is essentially, it's still supported with software, but the problem with the iPhone XS is that this is basically a device that, we don't really know how much longer it's going to last. So this phone was a second in place last year of getting drop support. Then, June came around and the iPhone X ended up not getting, iOS, 17. the iPhone XS right now is basically the oldest phone on iOS 17. So that can be kind of a concerning thing for some people, because if you're wanting to go ahead and basically get a device that is still supported with software, well then, this thing's still supported with software, but you're just basically getting an outdated, very soon you could be getting an outdated version of software, sooner than later. So with an iPhone XS, you're basically getting a device, like I said before, that is, last in place. So when iOS 18 comes around, who knows if this thing's going to be getting it or not? I have no insider information. It could very well be, that this phone is going to be getting that next version of software, but I could be totally wrong and I have no insider information to tell you otherwise. So I will probably tell you, in my opinion, that this phone is probably, it's 50-50. I would probably lean on the fact that this phone may not be getting iOS 18. I wish it would. I feel like it 100% could, but I guess, what can we say? I don't know for a fact, and that's just kind of how we're, going to be at as of this point. So, like I said, I wish this phone could last forever. It just can't. So we're just kind of stuck in this really weird phase where this phone is kind of still, I would recommend buying, even though it's probably not worth buying. It's just a really weird thing. So, in terms of software, that's kind of how I'd sum it up, to be honest. In terms of performance, though, this is actually still a pretty good performing device. So this thing has that Apple A12 Bionic chip inside of it, and it had 4GB of RAM. This was the first iPhone to bring 4GB of RAM, and I definitely do think that was one of the bigger aspects of this phone. The fact that it did have an increased amount of RAM from its predecessor, and the fact that it was still like a very good performing phone from that perspective was very cool. And honestly, this is probably one of its biggest aspects, or one of the biggest reasons why I like this phone. When you actually look at this thing compared against the iPhone 11s and all those other products, this one actually holds up very well, even against phones like the iPhone 12s and 13s. Clearly, the iPhone 15 is faster than this thing, and the 13 is faster than this thing too. But I would say for how old this phone is, you get the impression that it would be, slower than it is. It's like, 6 years old now, or 5 years, 2018, so it's, 5 years. So it's like 6 years old turning this year. And this phone is, still there, it's still hanging around. And I think that's something that's very, very cool that's, available here. So personally for me, I think the performance of this phone is actually a pretty good aspect of it. And that's something that I actually like a lot about this type of device. So that's that aspect. I think the battery life for this phone really isn't that great anymore. And I think that's just kind of one thing that happens once again when you're getting a device like this. So with the iPhone XS, this is a phone that's pretty much, I don't want to say it's outdated, but, the battery life of this thing isn't that great. And, when you're getting a phone like this, that's the oldest phone on the newest software version, you're always going to have some weird issues going on with battery life. And that's basically what's going on in this particular case as well. So to kind of sum it up, what I'll definitely tell you is the iPhone XS is still, I think, worth buying, but it's the lowest supported iPhone. It's the lowest phone I'd probably recommend on the totem pole. And that's just kind of, again, what happens when you're getting a device like this. When you're getting a phone like the iPhone XS, this is an iPhone that is pretty much on its last leg of software. And like I said, I wouldn't want to recommend this phone to a vast majority of people if it's not really getting software support anymore, if it's not going to be here for a much longer amount of time. And again, that's exactly what's going on in this particular case. So I look at a product like the iPhone XS, and this phone is, like I said, I wouldn't be the first one to recommend it. I still think it's good, I still think it's a good phone, but I just wouldn't recommend buying this phone if it's like the first option you have. I would much rather recommend buying something like the iPhone 11 or iPhone 11 Pro, or even iPhone 12, one of those iPhones that are more expensive. It's worth it to buy those ones than purchase this one, in my opinion. So take it as you will, but that's kind of how I see it. If you have any other thoughts or questions, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that will mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.